So, in view of all that we've looked at so far, worldwide flood, radiometric dating, thus by the end of the creation period, so-called, according to the Bible, each radioactive mineral would very likely contain a sizable amount of its radiogenic daughter, though actually but a few days old. It appears the Earth to have been created in a wonderful scenario, paradise, and deteriorated since then. Isaac Newton, things are devolving, not evolving. Fossil record, much larger, more complex fossils. Even mankind was fully functional. Again, at the time of the deluge, it seems reasonable that the increased radioactivity in the environment would have speeded up all decay processes by some unknown amount. Therefore, even in the relatively rare cases where the radioactive mineral was not disturbed excessively during the intense geologic upheavals of the creation and deluge periods, the relative amounts of parent and daughter elements would still be entirely incapable of yielding a valid record of true age, since neither the original amount of radiogenic material nor the changes in past decay rates can now be determined. We have nothing to go by, except the plausibility of things were better, far greater then. And we've had some experimentation in spheres in which oxygen was highly increased, 30–40%. Where one tomato plant that had, 5,000–6,000 tomatoes. Huge. Smaller animals and plants, huge compared to with the way they look today. The only thing reasonably certain is that the present decay rate and present amount of daughter element, if applied in a uniformitarian computation, must result in an age estimate immensely too great. Okay, moving on. The next point. Pleiochloric halos support creation and the flood, not evolution. What are those? Let's find out. Someone may object that it has been proved that the disintegration rate of uranium has never changed during past geologic time, since the size of the so-called pleiochloric halos is the same in strata of all ages. These halos are spherical zones of discoloration produced in rocks around radioactive nuclei by the ionizing powers of the alpha particles emitted from the nucleus. The distance to which these particles can penetrate before they are stopped depends upon their energy of emission. And this, in turn, is believed to control the normal rate of decay, high rates corresponding to large ranges. The range of the alpha particles depends, however, not only on the decay rates of the radioactive nucleus, but also upon the nature of the materials in which it is enclosed. Let's say they are enclosed. The denser the material, the shorter the range. For this reason, this particular argument is usually limited only to the halos surrounding nuclei of uranium or thorium in a matrix of mica. This argument goes that for this type of halo, the radius is always the same, and therefore that the disintegration rate must always have been the same. Well, in view of the observations made by a very careful scientist, it appears that the oft-reiterated claim about the constancy of the radius may be invalid, not valid. Therefore, there remains no actual evidence that the decay rates may not have been different at some time or times in the past than they are at present. The extent of the halos around the inclusions, which are foreign radioactive minerals within a rock, varies over a wide range, even with the same nuclear material in the same matrix, but all sizes fall into definite groups. My measurements are in microns, 5, 7, 10, 17, 20, 23, 27, and 33. Joly's figures correspond with those, except he does not include the smaller sizes and does include 39, 38, and 40, which I have not run across. Halos sometimes show 2 or even 3 definite rings or zones, indicating the presence of more than one radioactive element, each with its own specific alpha ray path. Roy Allen, The Evaluation of Radioactive Evidence of the Age of the Earth. American Scientific Affiliation, Journal of the American Scientific Affiliation. According to our hypothesis, all rocks are of essentially the same age, so that the fact that pleochoric halos have about the same radius in all of them is exactly what would be expected. And that would be that they were all formed about the same time, therefore the same decay rates, whether constant or changing, have continually occurred in all of them. Furthermore, it seems unlikely that even a substantial increase in the decay rate would cause any measurable change in the halo radius. The latter is determined mainly by the extremely short-lived elements in the decay chain, for these have the longer ranges. It does not seem necessary to conclude that an acceleration of the first stage in the decay process, the expulsion of helium atoms from the uranium nucleus, would thereby accelerate all other stages in the chain individually. But even if it did, the increase in alpha particle range, corresponding to increase in expulsion energies, becomes vanishingly small as the energies increase, and this factor would prevent any very substantial increase in the radius. So we conclude that a statistical constancy of the halo radii in rocks of various ages proves nothing about the decay rates. More on radioactivity. Meteorite. There you go. Meteorite radioactivity refutes concept of an old universe. From outer space. What's to be observed here? It is interesting that radioactivity age calculations made on meteorites are similarly very contradictory. There you go. By examining the helium content of several meteorites, Paneth arrives at ages ranging from 60 million to 7 billion years. Wow, that's a stretch. In re-examining the evidence, Bauer arrives at a common age of about 60 million years for the meteorites and also for the age of the universe. Dieter Haar, The Age of the Universe, Scientific Monthly. You know, these articles are obviously shorter than a big, long scientific treatise. Most of the readers aren't that into the details, not scientific enough to understand it. On the other hand, there's a basis for these conclusions in these short articles, which the volume of material that they produce. And when looked at, we find all kinds of contradictions. So it has been difficult for astronomers and geologists to accept such a small age for the meteorites in terms of any of the classical theories of the origin of the solar system. Most recent and much more subtle calculations have been invoked to reconcile the discrepancy. So when that is done, the age of stony meteorites, since solidification is found, the result is about 4.6 thousand million years. G.P. Cooper. Thus, merely by changing the method of calculation, one can increase the age of a meteorite from 60 million years to 4,600 million years. Wow. The latter calculation was made by the potassium-argon method, the first by the helium isotope method, both methods of which are not substantiated as reliable in the first place. So let's move on to the next point. The amount of meteoritic dust points to a young Earth. All these observations from every vantage point, they seem to point more plausibly to catastrophic Bible creation account of the deluge. And that means that the age of the Earth now is very young, because these things didn't take that long to happen. Catastrophically, it's instant. One of these lines of evidence of a recent Earth is derived from the study of meteorites and comets, of which there are large numbers in our solar system. A tremendous amount of meteoritic material falls each year on Earth. Estimates vary widely, but the most careful studies have been made by Hans Petersen of the Swedish Oceanographic Institute. Petersen, or I guess you call it Pettersen, calculated that the total quantity of dust of meteor origin in the atmosphere up to a height of 60 miles amounts to 28,600,000 tons. Half the total, 14.3, of such dust settles to Earth each year, and 14,300,000 3 million tons of new dust must enter the atmosphere. 20,000,006, 14,000,003. I think I got too many zeros there. That makes sense. Yep, little math there. Take out a zero. Isaac Asimov. 14 million tons of dust per year, Science Digest. Respective scientist and science fiction writer. Patterson confirms this. If meteoritic dust descended at the same rate as the dust created by the explosion of the Indonesian volcano Krakatoa in 1883, then my data indicate that the amount of meteoritic dust landing on the Earth every year is 14 million tons. This is tons. Dust. Hans Petersen, Cosmic Sphericals and Meteoritic Dust. All this sounds highly speculative and untrustworthy. The significance of this large amount of meteoritic dust in terms of the supposed great age of the Earth is noted by Asimov as follows. Of course, there goes on year after year after year, and the Earth has been in existence as a solid body for a good long time. And you say this because for perhaps as long as 5 billion years. And if through all that time meteor dust had settled to the Earth at the same rate it does today, then by now, if it were undisturbed, it would form a layer 54 feet thick all over the surface of the Earth. There you go. So this guy admits there's something wrong. Obviously, no layer of meteoritic dust of any appreciable thickness, certainly not 54 feet, is found around the Earth's surface. Although some indications of such a layer have been found on the ocean bottom, but still not 54 feet thick. Pedersen and Rachi have found good evidence from the peculiar nickel content of deep-sea deposits, both in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. I guess I could put an S there. That several thousand tons